5 years had gone by when my wife of 15 years, Adelia Lynn Masters, a former local Bank of America branch manager, requested a divorce, claiming she no longer loved me. She insisted there was no one else and that we had simply grown apart. I had my doubts, but I was never able to prove anything. Shortly after I overheard her on the phone discussing significant changes in her life, we agreed to joint custody of our daughters, then 14 and 12, and both of them chose to. After private interviews, I read an article in the newspaper today about Adelia Lynn Peterson, now a regional junior vice president, attending a charity event in New York with her husband Ronald Peterson, a senior vice president. Their daughters, Amanda and Miranda Peterson, who are now 19 and 17, were also featured. I assumed that Adelia had the prestige and status she had always desired, and the article mentioned her popularity in social circles. Her husband was once a casual friend of mine from Adelia, and he worked together at Bank of America, but even though Amanda and Miranda were my daughters, they had changed their last names. My first instinct was to call my assistant Helen Beard to confirm what I saw, and I discovered that Helen, who was also Adelia's distant cousin, was away for personal reasons that day. When Adelia failed to appear on the day our divorce was scheduled to be finalized, I became concerned and asked my lawyer why the judge had required both of us to testify about the terms agreed upon. Her lawyer informed me that she had moved out of state without my consent. Judge Donald McDonald's attitude abruptly changed when he asked if I had allowed our children to be moved. He said, "Can you go outside and try calling them on your cell?" I left the courtroom and tried to call them, but to my horror, all 3 numbers were disconnected. I checked their Facebook profiles on my phone and found that I had been blocked and unfriended. I went back to court and told my lawyer what I had found, and he told the judge the information. The judge swiftly issued an arrest warrant for my wife, accusing her of parental kidnapping. He halted the divorce proceedings until she appeared in person before him. Her lawyer was incensed and attempted to convince the judge that it wasn't a huge deal, implying that Mr. Masters could verify their agreement, which he did. The judge confirmed that he only testified that he didn't agree to the children leaving the state, but her lawyer countered that might not be true and that he might be lying, which is why she needed to be present. Later, during the police investigation, I found out that her family had claimed she had asked for a transfer because of long-term physical abuse allegations against my daughters. Even her Bank of America co-workers appeared willing to back up these claims, but no proof was offered. They just took Adelia's word because of her reputation, reasoning that it shouldn't matter because he's just a man. When our extended family and social services conducted private interviews with the girls, they confirmed no such allegations had ever been made. That evening after dinner, I stopped by to see him and his wife, not surprised by my visit. "I brought the paper for a reason. There's something you need to see," I said seriously as I opened the paper to the article. "For God's sake." The judge muttered, "Ruth, can you pass me my phone, John? Could you give me a moment, Donald?" Despite this, rumors circulated throughout town, fueled by Adelia's relatives over the previous 5 years. I went outside and sat on their patio with Ruth, who brought us both a beer. The judge's face paled. "Jesus Christ, and they've been right in front of us all this time. He's furious, and I've never seen him this angry." "HEK on the phone with the FBI, what did you show him?" Ruth asked. "I saw a picture of my missing wife and her new husband in today's paper. It's the first sign in 5 years that she's alive." I replied, "Oh no, what a mess, and that's why he called the FBI interstate flight with a." Ruth said why Bank of America didn't assist in finding her, citing a federal appeals court ruling that said it was a family matter and they weren't required to follow your husband's court order. "I've left for home because my emotions are getting the better of me." I told the judge that it had been a long, difficult night for me and that there was more to their relationship than friendship back then. She was hired as a financial loans officer in his department after we were married, and I was starting my consulting business with my daughters, now using different last names. I wondered if they were his or mine, and did either of us know the truth. I told myself to slow down, and the following morning, I was worried about Helen. Over the years, her contempt for her cousin had grown, and I knew that she believed me based on her actions. Several times, I wanted to confide in her, but I held back because I felt she deserved better than what I could provide in the midst of my own problems. Helen was a stunning woman with auburn hair, and I felt she was a. I admired her from a distance, never daring to involve her in my nightmare work, but fortunately, it diverted my thoughts close to the end of the day. My assistant knocked and entered John, saying, "2 gentlemen from the FBI are here to see you." Helen said, "Yes, I've been expecting them." I replied, rising, "How can I assist you?" As they entered, introducing themselves. "I'm Ma Holmes, and this is Douglas Dale. We're here to gather background on the situation." Outlined our history with her current husband, expressed concerns about their relationship, and brought up my daughter's name changes. I recommended DNA testing for clarification. I also mentioned that Judge Donald McDonald had stopped the divorce because of parental abduction charges, but she didn't show up. You'll need to find out if she filed for divorce in New York and whether her marriage is lawful. I suggested that the divorce was never finalized by the judge. Douglas clarified that's correct. The records show she disobeyed his order to appear, and I verified if you gave her permission to leave. Mac, the state with your children, asked. No, her lawyer told us she moved out of state. I replied, recalling the judge's instructions to contact them. I tried, but their numbers were disconnected, and I was blocked on social media. I added, she moved out of state before finalizing the divorce and remarried shortly after Doug noted it's clear it's intentional. Mac came to the conclusion that this was in conflict with her statements in her New York interview today, asking, when did you last contact them? When they took away their possessions, I recalled that I hadn't received any legal notices or local updates because it appeared that I was still legally married. I said, we can charge them for falsifying adoption papers, and I asked about it without receiving a response. I noticed that Helen had written a letter to the FBI verifying my signature after they left. Do you still reside at Yale? I asked. No, I sold it under court order after a series of incidents, and I clarified that I now live outside town at Ryder Lake to ensure my safety. Helen was shocked to learn about her distant cousin and showed curiosity and hope, but there were still too many unknowns, leaving me without answers. According to Helen, she harbored deep animosity toward her cousin Adelia for damaging John's reputation in relationships, causing him to lose family and friends. Seeing this damage firsthand made Helen wonder how much one could put up with. Helen, tonight when I leave, I'll turn off my cell phone if my situation troubles you. Use your judgment in an emergency, call my house phone. She had met John at a family gathering where Adelia's engagement overshadowed everything Helen had foreseen would lead to their relationship's demise. Before the truth came to light, she had watched John suffer in silence for years, putting himself into his work to triple his clientele. Helen had confided in John following her husband's death, finding comfort in his support, but over time she realized he was the person she wanted to spend her old age with, but John's troubled past consumed him every day. The disappearance of her children sparked vicious rumors, with some even accusing John of a felony. At Ruby Tuesdays, Adelia's father Roger unexpectedly approached him and shared that Adelia admitted John never hurt their daughters and used false claims to justify her departure. John demanded signed statements from relatives to believe their sincerity, dismissing Roger coldly. Many people in this town believe I'm guilty of something I never did. John claimed Roger left, and John wondered if anyone thought a 2-minute conversation could erase 5. I went to school with your daughters, and from what I've heard, they had no idea what was going on that Friday before they vanish. I saw the man who had just left working with other members of your wife's family as they packed up. The waitress said, I thought you should know, thank you for being honest. I replied, I've grown used to being lied to all these years, keeping mostly to myself to avoid the whispers and lies spread about. Years of suffering and lies followed. She went back to work after I paid her, and I generously tipped her to go fishing on the lake that weekend, which gave me comfort. I made coffee on Monday when Helen arrived early, and she was remarkably cheerful. After pouring herself a cup, she joined me in reflecting on Adelia and me getting married shortly after she graduated from high school, and Amanda was born shortly after I was flipping houses while she worked her way up in banking. I explained that I had heard what you told Roger everyone did, and my phone rang all weekend, so I told him that he could. It'll be an interesting week if all those calls turn into statements. Helen said, let's see if guilt moves them. She smiled. Some of us single girls enjoy early morning fishing. I laughed as I left work, and I thanked Helen for making my day better. You blame him because of what the family did, why she made notarized statements, and she asked for defamation. I asked, to reclaim my reputation, are you suing her? Helen replied, yes, to clear my name and restrict their funds. Helen discovered Adelia's legal address and work details, as well as your lawyer's appointments at 2 Serve Adelia, before charging her and freezing their assets. She said, Helen, you're leaving nothing to chance. I thought, God help Adelia, if you ever meet her in person. I returned to the office with chilled champagne and glasses, and Helen's chosen lawyer was taking my case, and I handed over all the evidence. By Thursday lunch, notarized statements proved that Adelia had lied about me abusing our daughters to justify leaving town. I included a news article about her new life, signed affidavits, old court records, the judge's ruling, and a warrant for Adelia's arrest. I also learned that the Bank of America was complicit, and the lawyer said that we should sue them too for helping to destroy your life. I replied, we Americans will sue over anything, and she smiled. Helen and I then shared champagne, but the judge called to ask how things were going, so I answered the FBI is moving forward with a grand jury against Adelia and Ronald next Wednesday, he said, adding that they will ask for custody of Miranda and DNA tests for everyone. Thank you, Donald. Regarding my divorce, I began, I'll grant it once she's in court, even via video. Donald assured Helen that if he sends her to jail, the FBI will handle the kidnapping charges, but he can rule on contempt. I explained that it's a waiting game, and yes, it's a Helen side. The next week went by swiftly, and on Thursday morning, my lawyer confirmed papers were. The FBI had detained them for kidnapping, which is defined by federal law as using force or deception to hold someone against their will for personal gain. Adelia faced multiple charges for taking her children without consent, including forgery to hide them with Ronald Peterson, her new husband from New York, and manipulating adoption papers. That afternoon, FBI agent Doug called for a DNA test phishing. On Saturday morning, Helen called about Adelia's FBI detention, and I was curious, so I went to the office to read us. Despite society's perceptions, Mr. John Masters became isolated when he tried to find his wife through Bank of America but was prevented from doing so by a court order. Ronald Peterson, a senior vice president at the bank, used his power to thwart John's efforts. John filed a slander suit against Adelia Peterson for falsely accusing him of misuse, resulting in ongoing police reports. We have 2 open attempted felony cases where a police officer claimed to have liquidated them. Got away with it. The AR article outlined the facts, and the Southeast Missouri newspaper called to confirm their accuracy. The reporter sympathized, calling the last 5 years a living hell. John said he was planning to sell his business and leave, and he gathered evidence for his case. Meanwhile, Amanda Peterson was shocked to learn that her parents had been arrested for kidnapping, and she was shocked to learn that her real parents were still together. Her mother was charged with parental kidnapping, and her stepfather was accused of aiding and abetting Amanda's departure for Cape. As she read a damning article about her parents, Amanda thought about the unanswered questions parked outside her rolled home. When the police arrived, they escalated the already tense situation. I'm Amanda Peterson, and I was waiting for the sheriff's department to leave so I could speak to my father. Amanda replied, and your father's name? The officer asked, John Masters. Amanda said, oh wow, and the officer exclaimed in shock. Go tell Joanne and Jay to put. After introductions and coffee, Detective Smithers read the article aloud, and everyone seemed shocked except for Joel, who said, you thought my father, didn't you? Detective Amanda said I was one of the few, but yes, from the time rumors spread. I have a copy in the car, should I get it? Miss Peterson, I'm Detective Joel Smithers. I know your father well. What brought you back here after all this time? He asked partially what happened last night in the U.S. today. Joel clarified that many of us in the South have our own ideas about justice, and your father has been shunned. Amanda asked where he lives now, and he's on 5 fenced acres at Ryder Lake with electric wire and an electronic gate. In 2 years, no one has seen him in town outside of work. It was too late when your mother's family stalked him, vandalized his house, and attacked him. We nearly lost him. I think I can help with that, Amanda said out loud. Tom said, I'll see if his company has an emergency contact. Give me a moment. Tom came back soon with an address. Do you know Helen Beard? Tom asked Amanda. She's a second cousin of my mother's. I believe that's why Amanda asked, because she's the only person on file who can reach him 247 in an emergency. She's tough and protective of your father, John explained. He gave Amanda the address after thanking them, and she set off. Helen Beard appeared to have a strong dislike for her father. Jot questioned what kind of lady could despise a guy enough to harm Jonathan Miranda in the way that Adelia did. At 4 a.m., our mother woke us up. Amanda told us that Saturday morning that she was still half asleep when she was dragged out of bed. She packed some of our clothes into the car and informed us that we would be traveling to New York for a week without warning. Helen asked some family members, who now admitted that they were aware of Ronald. I caught my mom talking to Ronald online, but I didn't know they had worked together when we were younger. She told me they met at a regional conference and became friends, but I didn't realize we didn't have our phones until 30 minutes later. I confronted her and she told me she had sole custody of us granted by the courts because we were moving to New York due to her sudden promotion and transfer. At the time, I believed her, but now I also inquired about our laptops, and my mother replied that the phones had been canceled because of the move, and she had to pay the remaining amount. She said the movers would pack and ship our laptops and the furniture, but we didn't realize they would never arrive. Amanda went on to say that we drove for 20 hours over 2 days, and Helen Beard recognized some truth in her story based on recent revelations from others who had finally spoken up about what Amanda's children were unaware of. Miranda was instructed to take out her new phone from her purse, which had a New York number that we were unaware of until then. She then had my sister open Google Maps, which gave us directions to Ronald Peterson's house. About 2 hours later, he had planned her big promotion to bring them closer together. Meanwhile, our family back home was told to discard everything except for family photos, which were mailed to us. As my sister and I were unpacking, we found completed adoption documents, which Amanda detailed. I believe you, Amanda, because I've already heard about half of this from the family. Up until now, the only specific information we knew was that the school district had given Adelia copies of your school records so you could enroll in your new school once settled in. He later explained that our parents agreed to this because he and Mom were getting married that night. Mom also revealed that Ronald was our biological father and encouraged us to give him a chance. Now that Adelia has been apprehended, the truth is coming to light. Just so you know, I've recorded our conversation, passed it along to the FBI, and your father Leighton went to Ruby Tuesdays for an early dinner. Helen said, while I'm doing that, look at these notarized statements and consider this. If she lied to you about your father John Masters, could she also be lying about Ronald Peterson? Helen left the room for a moment to observe Amanda before sending their conversation. Amanda was beginning to realize how much her mother's family had conspired against her father John. She sent the conversation to John, then to a civil lawyer because it was damaging, and finally to the FBI. During this time, she noticed that Amanda didn't try to get in touch with anyone. I left her alone for about 30 minutes so she could read some statements we received from the family. She didn't try to get in touch with anyone. Why did my mother tell the family that my father had been physically attacked? Adelia also knew your father would look for you, and he did. He even sued Bank of America to find your mother's location, and initially won but lost on appeal. Helen explained that we didn't find out about your mother's marriage or your name change until a few weeks ago when your photo appeared in the paper. Amanda asked the family never really approved of your father. I believe she used that to justify her abrupt disappearance and move far away overnight. How is my dad really? Amanda asked gravely. He keeps to himself and has lost a lot of weight. The prolonged stress has turned most of his hair white. His Facebook page was inundated with hate and threats, forcing him to close his account and remove his name from the corporate page. Your mother tried to re-establish contact with the family in an unsuccessful attempt to address her growing problems for more than 5 years. At times, we thought we might lose him twice. His life is slowly getting better, but even his own family is rejecting him. Divorce is difficult, but what he endured was much worse. People here still think he got away with the crime of the three of you. Does Dad have a girlfriend? Amanda asked. With the reputation your mother gave him, would anyone date him? Helen replied that for more than 5 years, he's had to defend himself against an unprovable lie, and Amanda stayed silent. Before concluding, Helen said, every time he tried to defend himself, it backfired because they had already made up their minds. He was left to fend for himself. Our sudden disappearance only made it worse by giving instant credibility to my mother's accusations. Adelia and Ronald planned it well. Your father paid the highest price. It got so bad that I feared he might take his own life. As the tears began to flow, Amanda realized the sacrifices Helen had made. She had supported her father for the previous 5 years. At Ruby Tuesdays, I sat in my car anxiously waiting for them to arrive, my emotions in turmoil, replaying Helen's and Amanda's conversation over and over in my mind. I believed what I had heard, but I couldn't fully grasp it when I saw them pull in. Years later, how much had she lost in doing so? Amanda stopped as they were heading toward Helen's, thanking Helen for what she asked for, having the courage to stand by and love my dad all these years. After I finished my cigarette, I turned off the car and got ready for one of the shortest yet longest walks of my life. The waitress who had served me a few weeks prior was now serving as the hostess she was hosting. I was a bundle of nerves, and I could hardly light a cigarette because my hand was shaking so much. Amanda had grown into a beautiful woman, and I could see so much of my own mother's face in her, which saddened me because my own family had disowned me soon after my wife and daughters vanished. As soon as I said, "Amanda's here," I sat her and her friend in the back. "Are you here to meet them?" I asked, and she went on. When we got to their booth, she led me to their table. Helen saw me right away and smiled. I walked up and sat next to her, holding Helen's hand for support. For the first time in more than 5 years, I looked directly into my daughter's bright blue eyes, and without saying a word, tears started to fall. When their house wine arrived, the waitress said nothing, poured our first glasses, and left us alone. Amanda was amazed at how much I had changed. I had shed about 40 pounds and looked thinner and older, with silvery white hair adding to the transformation. At my age, many women would pay a fortune to look that way. Amanda decided someone had to take charge, so she got up and I followed suit. We hugged each other tightly at the edge of the table and she cried out, "Dad," and I replied, "Oma," my former nickname for her. After our feelings subsided, we ordered food, and Amanda was shocked by how different I ate. Previously a meat and potatoes guy, I ordered a catfish platter with an unlimited salad bar. As Helen and I refilled our salad plates, Amanda took the opportunity to talk to me in private. "Helen probably loves you more than I do, And she admitted that she grilled me like an old army sergeant until she was certain I was being truthful and that I wouldn't let me hurt you again. I was old enough to look for the truth on my own, but I didn't. If a body had turned up during that time, I might have ended up in jail. I explained that's why years ago, after being attacked and hospitalized twice, I changed my will to leave everything to you. Helen found me on the verge of ending it all and pulled me back. When Helen returned, she saw Amanda crying and asked what had upset her. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that, Amanda. I've had no life to offer anyone for the past 5 years. I didn't say much, just that 3 years ago, while I was in the hospital, I changed my will to leave everything to Amanda. I told her that it was her love that saved me, and soon after lunch, both women were crying. We returned the rental car and went to my private home at Ryder Lake, where they admired the view and the layout of the house. I offered to carry Amanda's luggage, but she declined, preferring to keep us private. Helen asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner how you felt?" I couldn't. I felt stuck in my past. I acknowledged that I never knew what might. What happened next? Adelia and Ronald took advantage of my uncertainty. Now that I'm clear of their charges, I can offer you a future. Helen gave me a tender squeeze, and I suppose I'll be selling my house because I won't let you sell this place. Later, Amanda caught us kissing, which made her feel a little bad. We spent the next hour catching up on her life, learning that she was working at a stale business job and pursuing her master's degree online. She wasn't dating, so why didn't we? I said we could make it happen. Use your new perspective. Considering everything we've done together, you can start at a junior level and work your way up. Are you serious? Amanda asked incredulously. Yes, said Amanda Helen, smiling. We can start you off with a $5,000 annual salary. Wow, I guess I'll need to find a place to live. Touch, Amanda said. Don't rush, there's plenty of room here. But I expect you to do chores like old times. Amanda added emotionally. When I finally got my cell back, Amanda said, I'll fly out tomorrow to pack if I can arrange a flight depending on how long it takes. Amanda said, pretty, let's exchange phone numbers as we finish that. The FBI is holding me until DNA proves if Ronald Peterson's dad discovered the adoption papers were forged. Amanda's message read, Dad, I'm flying to pack tomorrow, moving back home, joining his firm. His number saved is Sir Miranda. Helen found me on the patio and asked how I was feeling, emotionally overwhelmed. I answered, bring mine and my laptop, lawyers can handle the rest. See if you can grab today's US Today newspaper, it explains a lot. Helen suggested that I take Amanda with me to get some of my clothes, saying that would give you some time to process everything. I sent her the program for the Gates electronic lock via her cell phone and gave her the house keys to copy, suggesting we might. When they returned, we were all grinning. I was on the patio cooking steaks, with salad ready and potatoes baking, and I watched them talk as they brought in a lot of stuff from 4 trips, now spread across the master bed, during a very late dinner. Need 4 was gone for about 2 hours, and I spent the majority of that time crying, finally letting go of the pain I had been carrying for so long. Mentioned that she would go at dawn. Helen and I would move more of her belongings tomorrow, and it made me happy to see the girls enjoy their meal. After coffee, my phone rang, and it was Doug Dale. Her DNA test confirmed that you are her father, and she wants to return home. She will land in Cape on Monday, and Doug told me that's wonderful news. Helen and I will be there to meet her. I replied, perfect, and Miranda saw the article online. By the way, Ronald Peterson was devastated because Adelia had deceived him about Miranda. It doesn't change his legal situation. One more thing, what are my daughter's legal names? I asked them, Masters, and Doug assured me that they would receive the court ruling on Monday to change their IDs. With that, he ended the call, and I struggled to speak as tears welled up. Helen and Amanda were worried, but I quickly collected myself and told them that Miranda would be arriving at the airport at 7:30 on Monday morning, confirming that she was mine. I said that when they told Ronald Peterson, he was devastated, and Adelia had him convinced she was his, and I knew it. Helen asked if my cousin Adelia ever told anyone the truth. Amanda said, I have bad news, you have to change your last name back to Masters because the federal court ruled your adoption invalid. My daughter sobbed as she ran into my arms, and Peterson never felt right. We said goodbye to Amanda as she left for New York to get what she wanted in her car, and then we went to meet Helen's 2 brothers and their wives and Jackson, who were going to assist her in moving the furniture she wanted out of her home because only 2 of the bedrooms were. The entire story was featured in the Sunday edition of the newspaper in Southeast Missouri. We met them for breakfast at Hickory House, and everyone saw how happy Helen was. Her sisters-in-law mentioned that in 6 months, with Helen's cooking, I would have some meat on my bones. The restaurant owner, a longtime friend, said, Congrats, John. This meal is on us. We completed everything in a single long day, and I believe Helen's sisters-in-law were envious of her new home. We were at the airport early because sometimes the connecting flight arrived early. Helen had told those who needed to know that neither of us would be in today. The response was that we figured that when we read the Sunday paper, I watched Miranda come down the stairs from the small plane heading towards me in blue jeans and a tank top. They declined, saying they would come when we had our first housewarm party with all of our family at home. She was a teenage girl with pigtails the last time I saw her, but now she was a stunning young woman. She ran toward me as soon as she saw me, and the sliding doors opened to let her in. She cried out loudly as she literally jumped into my arms, "Daddy." We both let our emotions run wild, and we didn't care that we were being filmed. I overheard Helen tell the local station reporter that it was John Masters and his youngest daughter, whom half the town believed he had liquidated. We broke up and turned to the reporter when Miranda said, "I'm Miranda Masters, that's my father John Masters. 5 years ago, with the help of my mother's family, we were abducted, and the FBI has their mother and her lover in jail for it. They spread false rumors that our father had physically abused us, but my mother's extended family may have been involved, and our dad did not and would not do anything like that. He is not just my dad, he is the most honest person I know. When our mother divorced our father, she told us that he was just a man getting what he deserved, and that none of us deserved what she did to us." Miranda hugged Helen and said, "Amanda and I had a long talk yesterday about everything we learned. It turns out that our mother lied and misled Ronald just as much as she did our dad in her need for attention. She nearly destroyed 5 days. As far as Amanda and I are concerned, we want to skip the hell part." Mom Helen broke down in tears and said, "You couldn't have said it better, Miranda." I agreed, "If you promise to be one of my bridesmaids, let's grab some breakfast, then we'll get you some clothes at Macy's." I suggested that we go to Denny's, but Miranda asked if they were still open. "Yes," she said, "but Huddle House is the closest thing to it for breakfast food." I said yes, and I was shocked by how much my youngest could eat. While we were shopping at Macy's, I purposely got lost and wandered away. There's something unmanly about watching women discuss bra sizes, underwear, and personal stuff. By the time they realized I was missing, I was almost back. Helen asked, "Where did you disappear to when I had to use the restroom?" I still found it hard to believe I had a life again, even though I thought it might be less expensive to get a room and board somewhere. My 2 daughters were back in my life in a way I had never imagined possible. After spending $300, we left the house with 2 bags. Helen took Miranda upstairs to show her the 4 bedrooms that were now furnished. When Miranda selected the room with her master bedroom furniture, Helen was overjoyed. Before the heat of the day set in, the ladies had iced tea, and I had a cold beer. I said that I had to sit and watch as Miranda tried on clothes because honestly, I thought she would look good in anything. I opened the box containing the 3-ring set and asked, "Will you marry me once my divorce is final?" She said, "Yes," and Miranda recorded it on video and sent it to Amanda with the text, "Yes, it fits." About 30 minutes later, Helen received an unexpected call, and both Miranda and I looked at her worriedly as she suddenly started crying. I didn't understand until she handed me her phone before she explained. When I heard "Congrats, Dad," I knew it was my oldest daughter. "Are you on the road yet?" I asked. "I left at 4 yesterday, and ever since, I've been driving almost non-stop." Amanda explained that there is less traffic at night and fewer police officers on the highway, so my car cruises well at just over 100. I told my sister that I had gotten her belongings, and she replied, "How far do you have to go?" I asked, "What time is it there?" She responded, "What time is it?" I replied, "About 2 p.m. I was unsure whether to be proud or upset because it seemed like she had driven for 24 hours straight. Amanda looked tired, but otherwise fine. When she said, "I need directions," I just pulled off onto the off-ramp at Kate and told her that I would text her the directions. Then, the house phone rang, and I hurried to answer it. John said that we've been swamped today, and Chris said some of the things Amanda did was check out Helen's engagement ring first. We're working on that. I mentioned that my daughter Amanda starts as a junior next week. She's new but working toward her master's in business administration. Chris asked if I could have her on my team. He said it would be long hours, but she'll learn the ropes the hard way. I agreed. Chris Ayar was a go-getter. I had hired him right after he graduated top of his class like us. The clients we lost because of the rumors are returning, and many of the new ones are from out of state. He quickly realized that business theory didn't hold up in the real world, and he openly admitted it. Everyone who worked under him learned the same way. His approach was to stop someone who was making a mistake and explain why their thinking or approach was incorrect. The only incorrect question was the one you didn't ask Chris. Helen. I will be taking the rest of the week off, telling them that we have a lot to sort out with our engagement in. I got a letter from the FBI, and Chris said, "Hell yes, thanks for the reminder, I'd forgotten," before hanging up at 4:30. The four of us headed into town, where we decided to celebrate our first official meal as a family at Lobster, a place my daughters chose. I pulled up in front of our office and asked Amanda if she wanted to see where she'd be working. She said yes, so we all went in as we had to deal with the girls returning home and enroll Miranda in school. When we arrived at the restaurant at 6:30, just in time for their annual all-you-can-eat shrimp deal, the receptionist got up and led us to the largest conference room. There was a huge banner that read, "Congratulations, Amanda met her new boss, everyone met my new family." My daughters were already calling Helen Mom, and I couldn't believe that I was now eating raw lemons like other people eat oranges. I also read the court ruling, which stated the first point. Emphasized that the used document was easily accessible on LegalZoom.com and did not require a lawyer. Second, that writing experts claimed that John Allen Masters' signature had been traced, resulting in irregular breaks in the ink flow. Comparing his signatures on the document revealed inconsistent breaks, in contrast to the natural pattern one develops over time. Third, that I had never signed my full middle name, and fourth, that the date of my signature, as reported by witnesses, was after they had left Missouri. The second page of the We spent the week resolving legal issues after a court ruling declared that Amanda and Miranda Peterson were never their legal names. Instead, they were always Amanda Masters and Miranda Masters. We first went to the Social Security office, then to the state attorney's office to restore their birth certificates, and finally to the motor vehicle department for new driver's licenses. Personally, I enjoyed registering Miranda in the 11th grade with the same principal who had been rude to me 5 years prior. Thursday's task was to get them new cell phones. On Friday, Amanda and Miranda accompanied Helen and me to the Ford Groves dealership in Jackson. Helen let me exchange her car for a new one, and the ladies each received a brand new lease to own a Ford Escape through my company. Once home, I sent Amanda a check for the trade-in value, which was applied against our down payment. At 5 p.m., my divorce lawyer called, and my daughters and I had a court hearing. I asked Helen if she wanted to attend on Monday, and she said that she would. We all sat in front of Judge Donald McDonald, who was watching Adelia Lynn Peterson on a big screen without her typical flair. She didn't look very orange. The judge asked her lawyer about the contempt charge, and he said that she didn't understand that she had to appear in court that day. Did you remind her repeatedly during the settlement process? Yes. Are you so incompetent that you think the defendant might be telling the truth? No. How does your client plead no contest, Your Honor? He turned to my lawyer and said, draw up the divorce decree and include a waiver for the required number of days your client has waited long enough, Your Honor. The judge said coldly, Your Honor, and her lawyer responded, it's not that extreme, not in my eyes, but she can appeal. The divorce was granted in favor of Mr. Masters, and she forfeited all remaining assets the day she left the state with her minor daughters. The judge looked at me and said, HEK recently got engaged to Miss Helen's Beard and wonders if you would handle the civil ceremony when they get married. My lawyer said, Henry, and the girls almost jumped out of their seats. I smiled and hoped it would go like this. If it did, he was supposed to use the money in his trust to pay Ford Groves for the car leases, transfer ownership to Helen and the kids, and write me a check for the remaining amount. I would be honored to them both, the judge said. The judge banged his gavel and said, Court is adjourned. As we stood to leave, the judge came over to shake my hand and introduced him to my future wife and daughters with the respect he deserved. He told them, I'm not on the bench now, so just call me Dawn. Before we left, he added, we need to go fly fishing soon, John, before it gets too hot. Adelia's face on the monitor showed pure shock with a big smile. She probably expected a light sentence for contempt, not this. I was learning that nothing excites girls more than planning a wedding, and that energy filled our home as we got back into routine. Helen put her house up for sale, and Amanda was fitting in well with my staff, impressing everyone with her. 3 more excited girls than mine were talking non-stop, and I wished I had a good pair of earplugs. Then I noticed a couple quietly leaving the court, and it hit me hard. It was my mom and dad. My dad said that forgiveness is easy when he disowned me. One night, while Helen and I were cuddling in bed, Amanda surprised us all by spotting overlooked issues that cost our client millions in potential sales. It took her 3 weeks to turn it around, and the result was a surprising increase in sales. During her first week, Miranda reconnected with old friends, and Masters Consulting was overwhelmed, landing 2 new corporations that needed complete restructuring to survive along with a major cash infusion.
Time is running out.
How long do you think we should wait before trying for 1 or 2 of our own? Helen asked, her dreamy eyes staring at me. I hadn't considered it, but after everything she had been through with me, I couldn't say no. As long as you're not in our wedding photos, I'll let you decide that. I said I don't need to explain why neither of us slept well that night when we exchanged vows on Mother's Day. Amanda was the maid of honor, Miranda and another niece were bridesmaids, Chris Acker was my best man, and I had 2 nephews. The judge married us under a canopy of spring flowers, and we men wore blue jeans, cowboy hats, and matching boots. The women dressed up, and Helen wore a traditional white gown and her bridesmaids wore yellow dresses. Her extended family prepared a delicious barbecue spread that evening, and our patio turned into a dance floor with live music. We were ushers at the small affair at the back of our house, with the lake serving as the backdrop. Adelia and Ronald's criminal trial started, and Ronald filed. Helen and I were fishing on the lake at dawn on Father's Day, and the fish were biting as soon as the flies hit the water. In less than an hour, we had reached our limit. Just before we headed back to shore, Helen gave me a card she had hidden, and when I opened it, I saw that it said, "Happy Father's Day, Daddy. We're pregnant and divorced." My civil lawyer was discussing the case with their lawyers in Bank of America's legal team. When the girls discovered how I got the news, they thought it was hilarious because they already knew about Helen's pregnancy. However, for me, it wasn't always that way. It took witnessing the birth of my son, who came screaming and weighing 7 pounds. I jumped with excitement and flipped the canoe, losing everything, including the fish, fishing poles, and our tackle box, and we paddled back to shore completely soaked. When she got there, I hurried her into Helen's room, where she was holding our son, Colin Richard. I told her that my mother had lost it because that had been her grandfather's name, and that my father and I still don't talk, so he would have to come to me, which he hasn't done yet, but every day is a new day and life goes on.